Zachary, I am going to go get a drink of water, so I will disappear for a couple of minutes.
Okay.
You can just nod. Okay. Ah.
Zachary, it's 6:30. I'd like to actually open up the meeting and then pass the baton over to Anthony once he has a chance to have a drink of water.
Okay.
Okay, I see Elizabeth and I see Anthony. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sharon Pope Marshall, and I'm the co-chair of Community Board 8. And Elizabeth Ashby is also a co-chair, and Anthony Cohn is a co-chair as well. I'd like to pass the baton over to Zachary, and then I will pass the baton over to Anthony.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. If this is your first time joining us, everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting except for the co-chairs and the presenters. Following the presentation, co-chairs will call on members of the public wishing to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon, pressing raise hand, not the wave or thumbs up buttons. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're on the phone, it is *9 to raise hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is for technical support only to help with Zoom software problems, not to ask questions for the co-chairs. They will not see the chats. If you have an older version of Zoom, you will need to go to the participant section where you will find the raise hand feature there. Please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you. Chat me, I'm here for support.
Anthony, you want to take it away?
Okay. Yeah, just yes. Okay. Good evening, as Sharon said, this is the it is still September meeting of the Zoning and Development Committee meeting of Community Board 8. And we have as our initial, our first agenda item, a presentation from from Northwell Lenox Hill, who will be telling us about their plans for the 77th, 76th Third Avenue site. I guess it's 200 Third Avenue. And so who from Northwell wants to speak?
So they are here. They're in just one room with one account. So Northwell Health is their name. You can unmute now. There they go.
Zachary, okay to go ahead?
Yeah, you can.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. My name is John Flanagan, and I serve as a Senior Vice President for Government Affairs at Northwell Health. To Sharon, to Elizabeth, and to Anthony, our co-chairs, thank you for your hospitality and for allowing us to join you this evening. And we've been told that this is a relatively informal atmosphere. I'm used to calling people chairs by their full names, but we'll certainly adhere to the protocol, and we're delighted to be here. When I say we, I mean Northwell Health. Northwell Health is a system. Quickly, we are the largest employer in the state of New York, roughly 80,000 employees. We have a significant footprint in not only the borough of Manhattan, but in the city of New York. And we are going to get engaged in talking about some of that, but I want to start by introducing some of the folks that are here with me directly this evening. I'm going to be making some comments. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Dan Baker, who's seated immediately to my right. Dr. Baker is the executive director of Lenox Hill Hospital. He has served for more than 15 years in the Northwell Health system. He is a valued leader in our system in a lot of different ways, on a lot of different levels. He was instrumental in our work during COVID. He has been a medical director. He's been an ER doctor. He has served in a variety of capacities. He is also involved very heavily in our patient experience. And that is a system where we are trying to basically enhance our patient experience, not only in the city of New York, but all throughout the Northwell Health system, which makes him uniquely qualified to be here tonight and to speak to the clinical nature of what we want to talk to you about at Third Avenue. For questions that may arise, we wanted to bring some of our team here this evening. Very happy to have Jonathan Cogswell here. Jonathan knows this project with his eyes closed and his sleep. Not that he sleeps anymore, but he's Assistant Vice President for Facility Services at Northwell Health. We have Chuck Richmond from Lend-Lease. They are our construction manager for this project. They have a wealth of experience, as does Chuck, all across the city of New York. We have Marissa Swag-Trigger, who is from Ennead Architecture. She is the associate principal architect on this project. And last but by no means least, we have Paul Selden, from Kramer Levin, and he is our land use counsel. So we have people who are expert in their areas, people who can answer questions, and I'm sure we're going to have questions along the way. And just wanted to make sure we made those introductions. So I recognize that we're at the Zoning and Development Committee of the Community Board. I wanted to thank the committee, and I want to thank the board writ large for their support in allowing us to be here tonight. I also want to thank Zachary, and I know Will can't be with us this evening, but the staff at District A, the community board, the district staff has been nothing but gracious and courteous and helpful in helping us get here this evening on the logistics, on the technology, and explaining to us the best way to proceed on this project. So I want to go to the first slide, basically. Get this right. Joe. Okay. I think it's very important before we get into some of the details on Third Avenue to just speak to Northwell as a whole. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Michael Dowling, our CEO, because all the bullets that you see on this slide here emanate from our senior leadership, but most notably our CEO, Michael Dowling. All the things that are on here are paramount concern to him, to our leadership, to the people at the ground level, to everyone that works in the Northwell Health system. And I can tick off each one, but clinical care, there's something that's kind of obvious about that. We have the best clinicians anywhere. Very proud to be working with the people we do. If you look at our educating the current and future generation of healthcare professionals, that is something I'm not sure that people realize system-wide across the Northwell system. We are training the best and the brightest. And I've seen the people we're bringing in. These are the best and the brightest. They are not only young leaders now, they're going to be leaders as we move forward. Research. Every single place we go, and Dr. Baker will talk about this, research that will take place at the Third Avenue, Medical Office Pavilion. That's going to be a significant component of the work that gets done there. Promoting health education. Our Senior Vice President, Deb Salas-Lopez, works in the health equity area, health access, disparities, addressing things like disparate outcomes, maternal mortality, and issues like that, diabetes, obesity. All of that is promoting health education and awareness. And I think the last, which is perhaps the most significant, which you're going to see in a subsequent slide, we take care of everybody. We are discerning in this regard. We take care of everybody. We make sure that everybody gets the most excellent care up-to-date care, state-of-the-art care from the best people. So we don't look at their ability to pay, and we calculate that into how we run our system. But I want to be very clear, the mission, which comes from Michael Dowling and our board and our leadership, is we take care of everybody. We take care of everybody like they're our family. So I want to move to our next slide. So if you just look at Northwell Health in New York City, I know this is a little difficult to see, but we have 9 hospitals. We have 1 affiliate, which is Maimonides. We have 170 physician practices. We have 20 urgent care centers, 2 ambulatory surgery centers, and 3 dialysis centers. And all those dots, they really mean something. So the blue dots that you see are our hospitals. In Manhattan, you have Lenox Hill, you have Meath, you have Lenox Greenwich. In Staten Island, we have Staten Island North and South. You can see Maimonides in Brooklyn. You see Forest Hills in Queens. We have Zucker Hillside. We have Cohen's Children's and North Shore LIJ, all of which is part of New York City. But obviously this evening, we're focusing on our facility that's going to be proposed at 3rd Avenue. So that's sort of a snapshot of the footprint that we have in the city of New York. Now, if you look at the patients that we serve, this type of information is significantly important. You have close to 840,000 unique patients. That translates out to 3 million plus patient visits. So normally somebody comes in, it's not necessarily a one-off. We have people come in for multiple aspects of care, and we can provide it in the most appropriate setting. If you look right below that, the people we serve, if you look at the cross sections between Medicaid and Medicare, almost 60% of our patients are receiving some form of government assistance. That is something we're very proud of. And I think it goes back to our point about we take care of everybody regardless of their ability to pay. And if you look at the nature of the patients that we serve and then shift over to the next slide, 60% of our patients identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. Shift over to our employment and what we do in terms of community impact, almost 27,000, I'll repeat, 27,000 employees of Northwell live in the city of New York. 57% of those employees identify just as our patients do, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So we have the very people who represent those communities taking care of the very people that we serve. Last thing that I would mention for the moment is if you look at our community impact, $2.7 billion. Dr. Baker can speak eloquently to this. That includes our COVID work. That includes our graduate and professional work. That includes our bad debt and charity care, our uncompensated care, things that we do at the community level, all kinds of community programs, not only in Manhattan, but across the city of New York and throughout the Northwell Health system. So we want to give you a broad sense of where we are system-wide, but get a little bit more granular when we're looking at the city of New York and the borough of Manhattan in particular. I want to be clear, the last slide or the last component that I mentioned, the $2.7 billion, that's for system-wide. That's not just the city of New York. The other information that you see before you is all about the city of New York. And these are important facts that we want to talk about. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to pass the baton to Dr. Baker, who will go through for you in some very solid detail the programs that we want to offer at 3rd Avenue. Dr. Baker.
Thank you, John. And thank you to the community board for inviting us here to speak. I am exceptionally excited to be here tonight talking about this new medical pavilion. I'm going to walk us through a little bit of the clinical implications and design and how we're looking to change the face of outpatient care. When we look at outpatient care in general, we see that patients are faced with a lot of twists and turns. They may have a medical oncologist in one location and then have to go to another location to see their cardiologist for any kind of heart disease. Equally, if just one condition we look at, we may see that they are looking at one location for radiation, another for infusion, and again, yet another to see yet another doctor. That leads to this fragmentation of the care and often patients feeling confused and left out of really the comprehensive care model that we want to deliver. What we're hoping to change is to make multidisciplinary outpatient care more accessible for New Yorkers. We wanted to do the reverse by putting the patient in the center and then wrapping them in the care that they're going to need. We are going to anchor this site with our Cancer Institute and all of the different entities that are needed to treat cancer, from the medical oncologist to radiation medicine to the consultation of our surgical oncologic services, and really allow for that patient to experience everything they need within one location. Equally, we're going to be offering a range of world-class outpatient specialty care that augments this cancer care. When we look at our cardiac care, this is one of Northwell's most extensive programs that's going to look anywhere from the education all the way through to the intervention. And equally, our neurosciences program, where we're going to be able to offer this world-renowned neuroscience care. What this pavilion won't be is inpatient care, so we won't see any inpatient beds. We also won't see any ambulatory surgery, nor will we see any ambulances coming to this site. This is an entirely outpatient environment. When we take a little bit more look at what's going to be in this pavilion, we envision it to be a new model for how we deliver this comprehensive multidisciplinary care. So if we take a little closer look at neurosciences to start, we'll see that it encompasses neurosurgery, neurology, epilepsy, spine care, neuropsychology, all of these different components that one individual patient may need in order to create the best outcome and the best care path forward. They're all housed together and again, wrapped around a patient. Unfortunately, a friend and colleague of mine was recently diagnosed with breast cancer. She found herself at one location for mammography, at another for the biopsy. She saw a medical oncologist at yet another place, and then went to a separate location for the surgical oncologist, and then another for the plastic surgeon. We are bringing all of these individuals to one space. She can see all of them here at this medical pavilion under one roof. That is a complete 360 envelopment of her, so that at one of the most anxious times in her entire life, she goes forward feeling that the journey is met with her care partners together. Additionally, we're going to have services such as lab testing. We'll have holistic wellness services and imaging in the building. When we look at this, again, it's outpatient, and it's very complementary to the services that we're going to provide in our inpatient arenas, as John spoke to, Lenox Hill Hospital, Meath, and Lenox Health Greenwich Village. But yet it's different, and it needs to be separate. We saw this remarkably during COVID, and services that were really outpatient in nature that were embedded in the hospital needed to be removed. Infusion was one of those. We took it from Lenox Hill and we put it out to Meath so that we could actually continue the care of our patients in a COVID-contained environment. We continued their clinical research trials and the medications they need for their cancer care, separating it from the hospital, which is a very important piece in terms of what we're trying to do here. We're very excited to have the Northwell Health Cancer Institute here and have this be a flagship site for them in Manhattan. We see more cancer patients than any other institution in New York State, and we have about 19,000 new cancer diagnoses annually. What we can do differently than many of the specialty hospitals is really, again, focus on the 360 nature to the care that we can provide. We're with you pre-diagnosis of cancer when we're talking about prevention and screening. We're there for you when you're diagnosed with cancer, and we work towards survivorship. And then we're there after the diagnosis of cancer, continuing your care with any different conditions that you might have. Equally, we can offer the same services to your family members, to your loved ones, all within the same building, all in the same spot, so that people aren't all over the place and disjointed in the care that they need to be. In addition to these premier cancer services, we're going to have advanced cardiac programs. So one of Northwell's most advanced programs, again, this looks at the preventative nature to cardiology. How do we help prevent heart disease through education and screening? How can we go immediately to imaging that will be in the building to understand if you have risk factors, is there actual disease present? And then how do we structure what the care plan needs to be, whether it needs to be medical with medicines and conservative therapies, or we need to go to the hospital for some form of intervention. On our neurosurgery department, this means pre-operative and post-operative care, whether it is spine or brain tumors. It also includes neurology, which will have centers for Parkinson's, epilepsy, and MS. And most importantly, we're really excited that we're going to embed women's health into this building. There will be a women's heart health center. And this is part of our Cass Institute Center for Women's Health. Very excited for what that can do for a population who needs to understand care differently. The pavilion will also support cutting edge research. As John spoke to, we're very proud of the research that we do at Northwell, and we need to embed that right at the point of care. In order to really push the medical frontier, we need to get patients into clinical trials. By embedding that into this pavilion, we make certain that each of our patients has that opportunity to participate. And then lastly, we're focused on sustainability. So we want to make certain that the build of this building in and of itself has design which incorporates carbon reduction and other initiatives and high grade standards that benefit both the health of those who are participating in the building as well as the community that this building resides in. A first look at some of the most recent renderings of this building will see that it's roughly 200,000 square feet of zoning space. We'll also see that the building is 15 floors tall and is around 215 feet to the mechanical pavilion. We want this to be both architecturally interesting, but most importantly, we don't want it to be obtrusive into the community where this building is going to live. So the materials that we use will be commensurate with the similar buildings and its surrounding. Taking a little bit closer look into the inside of the building, you can see the multitude of programs that are going to be put in here. And I look at this really through three journeys. The first is that of the patient. When we designed this building, we really wanted to design it uniquely for the patient. And so we started to separate things like physicians' offices from the clinical exam and consultation rooms so that the floors of clinical care are purely clinical. And that allows the exam rooms to be bigger, to incorporate the family and caregivers in them so that everything can be done within that one space. As we spoke to about cancer care, if you need to see a medical oncologist, which might be on floor 10, and you also need to have an appointment with a surgical oncologist who usually is on floor 8, we don't have to send you to 8. We can actually just bring the surgical oncologist to you on 10 so that the patient doesn't actually move. Instead, we move around you and bring the care to where you are. Far easier to accomplish for the patient. The other journey is through the integration collaboration for the physicians and clinicians working in this building. We've put all of their offices together. They happen to be on the top 3 floors of the building. That way they can actually think and talk together to really improve the outcomes of patient care. Our neurosurgeons can talk to our neurologists, our cardiologists can talk to our oncologists. Everybody is there working in the same space, bringing in all of this incredible thought and this ability to really, again, push the boundaries of the next medical frontier. And the third is really about the community. How do we make certain that this building incorporates community space? We will have a multidisciplinary area that will include a teaching kitchen. We can focus that, again, on women's heart health and the nutrition necessary to maintain that. Or we can focus that on simply nutrition, no matter what the disease that we're talking about. We have areas of communal space where we can invite in groups like AA and NA to make certain that they have a safe space and a support that they need. And we can also take a look at the different support groups that we need to provide to patients so that when caregivers and family members need help and better understanding of what their family members are going through, we can supply space for them, but equally medical expertise and opportunities to really bond together. The concept of a shared visit can equally be housed within this building, meaning that we don't have to make this between one patient and one physician, that we can bring in a group of individuals all going through the same thing. We can talk together about what's working best for them. How do they incorporate exercise into their daily routines? What can we think about differently to really make certain everybody's getting the care that they need? Taking a look at the ground floor plan, it is imperative, as John spoke to, that we start with the patient experience. This building was started with the patient in mind, and that needs to be from the very moment the patient comes to the building. We know that individuals are entering with anxiety. It's not necessarily a place that they're wanting to go, and we need to make that inviting. So we changed the first floor plan to be open, inviting, and more of a lounge like a living room than it is any kind of doctor's office. We have this idea of how we can invite people in and allow them to use technology or not, depending on their need. So that you could simply pull out your phone, have everything pre-registered, have a code that lets you get all the way through up into the office where you can see the doctor that you came to see. If you need to interact with a kiosk for some help, they will be present. Or equally, if you want to speak to a person, we'll have that embedded into this lobby and in this space. So that again, those individuals who might not have access to technology or for when technology fails. You can see this wide open space of where people can wait, where they can have access to a small cafe, and equally the patient service center, which is where we can offer labs and blood draws so that if you need that during your stay in the building, we start that out first so that it doesn't delay your care and that those labs are ready by the time that you see your doctor or they are needed for your care. We're very excited again that really focusing this entire building on how is the patient going to journey through it. I'm going to turn it back over to John to take us a little bit through the anticipated project schedule.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Baker. And so I want to go through our anticipated project schedule, but to the community board members in particular, we have endeavored to reach out to our New York City elected officials, have done so at the direction of people from the community board, have done so based on experience. And so we have coordinated with the offices of Councilman Powers, Councilwoman Menon, Borough President Levine, Councilwoman Brewer. We have reached out to the community board, obviously, as well, but I've spoken on a number of occasions with Linda Cornelius from the Block Association. I recently visited the Wagner School on 76th Street, attempting to coordinate with the Birch-Wathan School on 77th Street. And we are endeavoring to get out as much as possible. And what we were attempting to do was let them know what we were starting to actually bring forward. But obviously we wanted to be here first and share the information with the community board. We have shared this deck, this presentation with the people that I referenced. And Councilman Powers in particular has made it very clear to us the protocol that he expects that we be fully informing the community board, making sure the community is incredibly well-versed and that we are responsive. So before I go into the timeline, I want to underscore something that hopefully is apparent, but I'll repeat it. I mentioned a number of professionals that are with us here tonight. Dr. Baker spoke eloquently about what we do at Northwell. We're supported by people who will help us get this state-of-the-art, beautiful building up out of the ground and operational and running. But this is a Northwell project. We are the owners, we will be the owners of this property. And what happens here will be a function of how we do things and how we interact with the community. I take that obligation very seriously. I know all of my colleagues do. So as we move forward, we want to set a tone and be as responsive as possible and do that as quickly as possible. In the conversations that I've been involved in, I think we're in a pretty good spot in terms of what we've done to date with the demolition of the buildings that have been on the site. There is one building to be removed. So if I speak to the concept of demolition, questions will come up. We will be applying for building permits. We have an existing demolition permit. We are not anticipating taking down the last building on that site until basically last month of this year. That would be December. And we have every expectation that we will commence work at that point, take a break over the holidays and start that work back up in January, first quarter of next year. So the initial phase that everyone will be concerned about will be the demolition. Then would be our foundation, which you can see on this timeline is expected between foundation and excavation will take approximately 7 months. So that's obviously a function of a variety of different things, but we have no desire to delay. We want to do this as expeditiously as possible and as properly as possible. And I can tell you with the people that are seated here, every one of them takes their obligations very seriously. We've been in contact with the local labor unions at the direction of our elected officials as well. Safety is a huge, huge concern for everything that we do and everything that we will be doing. I think what you see right now in terms of the existing property, how it's been maintained, the lighting, the aesthetic, the fencing, the efforts that have been made to date, we want to continue that and grow that as we move forward on this process. Next phase, of course, would be the structure and facade, which will take roughly a year. And one of the things that I think is important to recognize is that this is a process. It's an evolving process, not in terms of our desire or plan, but we have to work with city agencies. We have a bevy of agencies that we have to interact with. DOT, DOH, DEP, New York City Planning, we have the MTA. So we have a whole litany of agencies that we have to interact with. And it's not as if we're going in tomorrow and we're going to apply for every single building permit. You all know that's not how it works. It's going to be a phased process, and there'll be some moving parts during that process. But if you look at what we have proposed here, you can see we should be buttoning up the exterior of this project sometime in 24 and working on the interior. And with any luck and good fortune, which is always in good order, we would have occupancy in the latter part of 2025. We don't want to be agents of delay, but whatever we're going to be doing, we want to make sure that we're doing it the right way. Now, I want to close on this point. I want to thank the board for their indulgence in listening to our presentation. And our colleagues here are ready to answer questions. We'll figure out, I'll help determine who may be able to answer questions or not. But what I want to finish on is this meeting and our attendance here. We are here because we want to be here. We're here because we want to share this information. We know, and you know, that this is an as of right application, and we're doing everything in conformance with all the rules and regulations, statutes of the city of New York, and any requisite permits and permissions that we need to garner. There was a request for us to be talking about a separate project, and I want to repeat, separate project. There was a request for us to start to provide information on Lenox Hill. That is not what we're doing tonight. We want to make sure that this is about 3rd Avenue, the surrounding community, this project in its entirety, and giving it as much attention and detail as is appropriate for now and moving forward. To be clear, we have every expectation that we will be re-engaging sooner rather than later with the very people that are on this call and a variety of community organizations on the Lenox Hill project. But that's a standalone separate project. I do not want anyone thinking for 1 New York minute that we don't take that very seriously or that we're not paying attention to it. We will be re-engaging with all of you, and it'll be a methodical, detailed process that gives you an opportunity to be heard on a smaller level and on a larger level. But as we started off, this is about 3rd Avenue, and to our chairs and to all of you who are listening, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you. Elizabeth or Sharon, do you want to handle calling on people? Do you want me to go ahead and do it? How do you want to do this?
You can go ahead, Anthony.
Okay, so I will give people a minute or two to queue up for questions, first from the public. I think even though 2/3 of the three hands up are board members, committee members.
Anthony, may I respectfully interject something when you were saying queuing up?
Sure.
I owe you an apology and everyone on the call. The last slide is about contact information. We have essentially updated our website for purposes of contact information, and hopefully everyone can see it there. The website is northwell.edu/77th Street Pavilion, and the email is 1345 3rd Avenue at Northwell EDU. Up until now, there's been a different format. There's been a bi-weekly update that has been monitored. We have every expectation that we will be engaging on anything that comes in. We will continue to have these updates, but I also want everyone to understand we want to answer people's questions and address their concerns, and we want to do it in as expeditious manner as possible. I apologize for failing to mention that.
No problem. While people are still raising their metaphoric hands, I have a couple of questions. One was that just a confirmation, you said there'll be no ambulatory surgery in this building, and there's a reason why I'm asking, but is that true?
That is correct.
Okay, now, but there will be some sorts of surgical procedures here. And I don't quite understand. Maybe you could explain to us what the difference between ambulatory surgery and what you will be doing here. And I'm not talking about infusions or things like that, but I saw something that looked like surgery in one of the slides.
Yeah, so you'll see the word surgery that's put on there, and what that is to indicate is really our surgeons and their ability to work in an outpatient office. So even though there won't be surgery in this building, we will have surgeons or physicians who are surgeons. So they're going to be meeting with patients to do preoperative understanding and management of the medical conditions and to get them to a state of understanding whether they need surgery. And then postoperative care will also take place in the building. So once surgery has happened,
Okay.
as you might follow up with a doctor, you would follow up here.
Okay, and I'm asking the question. I asked that question for a reason. Two related questions about the ground floor, which you very generously showed us. I appreciate that. First of all, did you give any thought during the design process to some kind of drop? Everyone hates curb cuts, but everybody hates taxis completely. Taxis and Ubers completely blocking 3rd Avenue as people try and get in and out. So that's a question. Did you consider a drop off?
Everything.
I would love that.
Just to reintroduce myself, my name is Jonathan Cogswell. I am the Assistant Vice President of Facility Services at Northwell, as John introduced me earlier. We have one of the things that we are looking at with this and working with the Department of Transportation is finding a way for us to have what we would call a lay-by-lane in the parking zone on 3rd Avenue, so that we don't have that double parking at the main entrance for a drop-off. One of the challenges with this building is the amount of square footage on a footprint on the floor plate, and what we needed to achieve with the core of the building, and being able to cut into the building just wasn't really a feasibility in this. But we are hoping with the assistance of the DOT to be able to seclude a couple of parking spaces on 3rd Avenue to allow to get that drop off out of the traffic lanes.
Okay, and then my last question, I promise everyone, at least for now, is did you give any thought to some sort of 1st floor retail? This was for many years an important restaurant and local neighborhood retail site, and I didn't see any.
We could probably combo answer this in many ways. And I was a frequenter of the Atlantic Grill, so I enjoyed that restaurant equally. We did, attempt to see what it would look like to put retail in the building, but to really accomplish the patient experience and design of eliminating waiting rooms throughout the building in particular, so that you're going directly from this lobby entrance and going to your consultation room. It just pushed out any opportunity to have retail in there. So it really, again, became about putting the patient in the center of the design in terms of what we were trying to do. And that's where that lobby design ended up winning out over the retail. I don't know if you have.
You answered it perfectly.
Well, let's say it's an answer. And
We'll agree on that.
I would say a little less than perfect from neighborhood perspective, but certainly well considered from the patient's perspective. All right, so let's start calling on people from the public. The first is Joe. Please give your full name and your address, or more or less your address.
There you go. You're unmuted now.
Your last question was my question, so it sort of was answered, but I really want to emphasize, first of all, let me say I live across the street at 176 East 77th Street. I'm sure the project is very worthy, but the neighborhood, the character of the neighborhood was changed tremendously. There was a bank, a liquor store, 2 restaurants, and a number of boutiques. And no matter how beautiful architecturally the building will be and how worthy the project is, it's a different feel in the neighborhood. And frankly, I don't think that was a good answer. Why not have 16 stories and have the 1st floor be retail? It would be an ongoing income to Northwell in the future, and it would allow the neighborhood to continue to enjoy perhaps a restaurant, a Starbucks, or whatever might go in there. And I really feel that's very important to the community, in addition to the wonderful facility that will be built. So that's not really a question. it's sort of, let me leave it with a question. Why don't you reconsider that?
So I understand the concern that you're stating, and certainly, you know, you have an opinion that has been asked by many. I think that really, again, pushing it back to the patient, there was really and the other component of trying to be respectful of building height equally and not build higher, as we know that that is a very important component to what the community looks for. But the idea of really bringing in patients at the ground level and having that streetscape be very inviting to the patients who are going from a very anxious time period of seeing their doctor, of not necessarily wanting something that's going to look and feel very sterile, but very welcoming. And that's really where that design allows for that.
I can just add something from an architectural standpoint. Understanding your perspective, of course, that also I remember the block before, and in it, with the desire to keep that ground level at least activated, there is a level of sort of transparency, and the aesthetic is really one that will lean more towards hospitality, where you see an active first floor and not necessarily a clinical environment. And that is something that is the team is very aware of and working actively towards achieving.
Okay, thanks. And let's go now to Sue Kaplan.
Yeah, thank you. So Sue Kaplan, I live on East 77th Street facing what will be the new building. Again, a worthy project, but so question is, in the spirit of helping those of us who live in the neighborhood continue to feel the character of the neighborhood, have you given thought to what those of us who have homes that face the building, whether on 77th or 76th Street, are going to be looking at during the day and at night? And at night, I think about the light coming out of the building.
Yeah,
We're gonna
We have, we always think about kind of, oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at. We have, and we do think about all of the views to the building as a neighbor, and from an aesthetic perspective, I would say in terms of what you'll be looking at, right now we have some aspirational renderings, but really the ultimate goal is to give you a warm material palette that would be consistent again with more of like a residential feel building, very contextual with the warm brick colors, limestone colors. There's going to be some texture to the building to allow for some interesting lighting. And in terms of lighting, I would say again, the lighting is really organized around the program, which is going to operate during regular business hours. So you really won't have an impact any different than you would from another neighbor, really.
Yeah, no, that's a great point that I was going to mention as well. There's a very small portion of this building that would operate for 24 hours, but that really won't have an impact on the lighting or the environment in that perspective. So we're expecting to be good neighbors from that perspective in terms of the hours of operation.
And I think one of the great things as we look at the carbon reduction initiatives and energy conservation, will put lighting systems into this building that will allow us to control whether the lighting is dimmer or brighter within the building. So when you think about what may happen in the building like this after hours with housekeeping and things like that, we're able to bring the lights up in the interior of the building to allow them to do the work they need to do while keeping the lights dim on the exterior. So the effect on the outside of the building is greatly reduced.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie Reckler is next. You can unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for this wonderful presentation. It's really, I think your concern about patient care is truly admirable, and I like the emphasis on the whole patient. You spoke to dropping patients off. I'm concerned about the traffic implications of pulling up to the front of the building in a bus lane. I don't see how it's going to work, and I wonder if you could speak to it in more detail. I don't understand from looking at your diagram of the building, how you're going to drop off laundry and materials and take out your garbage. It doesn't seem that that is completely thought out, and I'd like more detail on that. And I'm sure you can address that. And I thank you for the presentation.
Absolutely. Happy to talk about both of those. And I'm actually going to ask if we can pull our presentation back up for a quick second. I can answer a couple of those questions for you. But while my partner's doing that, I will talk to the parking for the drop off for a quick moment. Currently, the lane directly in front of this building on 3rd Avenue between 76th and 77th is a parking lane. So what our intention would be is in working, as I mentioned earlier, working with Department of Transportation to try to eliminate permanently 5 or 6 of those parking spots along that zone right at the main entrance of the building. So we aren't asking people to drop off in a traffic lane. We're asking them to pull in and drop off at the front door in what is that parking lane on 3rd Avenue, and then be able to pull back into traffic was the intention from a drop-off perspective. And if you see the image that was brought up on the screen here, you'll see a materials receiving zone there on the right-hand side of this first floor plan. This is a zone that has been designed so that we can open a door, we can bring a truck fully into that materials receiving zone and close the door behind them so that we can offload goods, materials such as laundry and linen, as you spoke of, be able to remove trash from the building into a truck, all internal to the building. So we're not necessarily interfering on the exterior of the building, blocking the sidewalks and such things, that we're able to fully do this in the building and then pull the truck out and have them pull away. So that is our intention for handling the receiving aspect of the building, as well as the disposal of trash. I hope that that answered your question.
So on 76th Street, you've eliminated some parking spaces. What have you eliminated?
Currently on 76th Street, on the northern side of 76th Street, just about up to where you see that first green box is currently a no standing zone. And then there's a fire hydrant immediately behind that. So we're, as part of our conversations with the Department of Transportation, we will be asking to pull what will probably be 2 parking spaces, additional parking spaces off the 76th Street side. But we're doing our best to utilize as much of that current no parking zone that exists.
And how many trucks can you get into this materials receiving?
We will only ever have 1 truck at a time. We're working very closely with the Northwell internal distribution systems so that we can do as much of our work not in this building as possible when we look at how we distribute our materials. So we have our own trucking systems that come out of our warehouses out on Long Island. And we're able to pre-pack and pre-plan. So we bring our own truck, bring it in the dock, offload it, and it goes. We're not bringing in multiple vendor trucks, and so that we can control it in a much more concise and friendly manner.
And is this happening 24/7?
No, we will only work this receiving dock during normal business hours.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Stephanie. Sam Frankel is next.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. I live in a building across the street on 77th Street, just to the north. And my view will get blocked, but I'm not a big believer in NIMBY, so I don't mind that. But as a new neighbor, you're moving on to 3rd Avenue, our biggest commercial retail strip, and you're not providing any more retail or commercial. And now, of course, now I hear you're also going to take some parking spots. But I really think that if you're moving in as a neighbor for the neighborhood, you should consider putting retail on the first floor. It is a major retail strip. If you were moving onto a side street, I don't think it would have been an issue. But it's just going to be a ghost town. It's like putting a stadium in or any other large thing. It's just a ghost town at night. That it really wasn't a question.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. That was actually a good comment, however. Wendy McAver is next.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for a very thoughtful presentation. I want to preface my remarks by saying that my late father was the director of Hospital for Joint Diseases, and he developed the Orthopedic Institute. And I remember this process from those days and building now down there. And it's very exciting to have new medical facilities for a community. I am a member of the community, but I do not live across from the hospital. I live across from a different construction site, which will have many floors of similar kinds of medical office space. And so I have a couple of really 4 questions. One is, I saw the facade materials on the ground floors, very thoughtful in terms of the limestone and brick and textured materials, but further up, it looked as if there was a lot of glass. And people who have heard me testify in CB8 know that I'm very concerned with environmental issues. The glass is very deadly for us because it heats up our environment, and it causes an urban heat island effect and other environmental hazards, as well as the fact that it will reflect noise. We're noticing an uptick in noise in our neighborhood as the tall buildings go up. So will you reconsider and increase the other materials other than the glass, which I think will address somebody else's issue about the light emanating at inconvenient times. So that's question 1. I'm asking you to hold that because I've got question 2. The retail on the avenue side is an important question because we have the largest sentient ambulatory senior population in New York City, and we rely on the safety of our streets, and that has little to do with our very well-esteemed officers from the 19th precinct. We count on our retail spaces to be open at night, to keep the streets light and safe. And I see that in your plan, I know you don't have that slide up right now, but you do have some space that was on the lower left of the slide. And there's no reason why that can't be retail space that opens to the street and stays open. Into the requirement of the lease would be that they stay open into the evening. That would be a good neighbor policy and not just a top-down dictating what you think patients would like. I've been a patient. I have immediate family members that have been patients, and I'm telling you that the retail space makes us feel safe coming and going in and out, and keeps our neighborhood very safe in the characteristic of neighbors looking out for each other. That was number 3. Number 4 is noise mitigation. Especially during the construction phase, there are measures that can be taken. And also, will you commit to doing this only on weekdays and not continuing the construction on the weekend? And the 4th issue is meeting spaces. It's lovely that you want to have, I heard this plan a couple of years ago about having an instructional kitchen, which must be somebody's very favorite project on the staff there, because I heard it before. But what our community really needs is a space to have a meeting room, an auditorium, a conference room that we can be able to use as a community to be able to get together and to join with you, but also to deal with our other issues that have nothing to do with hospital and neighbor policy. So those are my 4 issues: facade materials, retail space for safety, noise mitigation, and meeting spaces. Thank you so much for listening.
That was was remarkably
Thank you.
impressive.
That was incredibly impressive.
Thank you so
You
much.
want me to start?
Please.
Okay, so,
Please.
okay, so, first off, I did want to talk a little bit about safety. So, you know, we are creating a space that will be staffed by our security staff on the first floor, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we will be providing onto this block. It may not be the type of safety that you're thinking of from having, you know, open retail stores bringing light out on the street, but we will have, you know, a semblance of light coming out from that first floor to activate that first floor. And we will have our security staff that is within that building 24/7 patrolling around that area. So I'm hoping that will help to address the concerns about safety with safety and security within this block.
It does not. I'm a woman walking alone, and I used to have to walk alone home at night from Cornell Hospital on 68th Street up First Avenue to 81st Street. I'm well aware of which blocks were safe and were not. An empty block with a facade. I know you have wonderful staff and very concerned, personally lovely security members. I've had many conversations. I have an orthopedist at Lenox Hill. I really appreciate the good staffing that you've done. It is absolutely not the same as having a lively and vibrant space where our neighbors are looking out for each other. Having a guy on patrol is not the same thing. Having a blank facade is not a safe thing for a woman to walk by. So do not think that that is a substitute, but I appreciate your answer.
Okay, thank you.
Understood.
Understood, absolutely. From a noise mitigation perspective, I'm going to ask Chuck Richmond from Lend-Lease, who is leading our construction team, to talk a little bit about the plans for noise mitigation related to the project.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm on the screen
here.
So DOB and DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, are very strict in what they require from a planning and a paperwork and a permitting standpoint. We are required to provide a construction noise mitigation plan before we start work. That needs to be submitted, approved, and always available on site. And addresses any of the heavier construction equipment, generally at the front end of the project, excavation equipment, pumps, things of that nature. We do safety measures or noise measures where we attach sound attenuation blankets on our construction fence. We put mufflers on our excavation equipment, and we have to monitor the decibels and keep it below a set decibel. I think it's 85 dB, and that's monitored by a third party. So we do have very strict rules that we need to abide by during construction to make sure noise stays below a certain level.
Thank you so much. That certainly is not happening on First Avenue. So I very much appreciate that information.
I think it's important that we all bear in mind that no matter how hard anyone tries, construction is noisy, and so the best thing we can do is not start too early or go too late. But that's obvious. That's a conversation for another time. To Cornelius, please.
Thank you, John and Dr. Baker, for your presentation. I live at 205 East 77th Street, and I represent the East 77th Street Block Association. A number of my questions have been answered previously. One that has not has to do with the elevation of the building that may be a prototype on 77th Street and also on 76th Street. As residents who look directly at that building, it looks, and in your rendering, as though there is a space at the eastern end of the building on 77th Street. Is that going to be a lower elevation, or is the building going to be of all of one height?
Oh, I think the height and setback requirements, I think
Is that a setback?
Yeah, it will be lower. I'm sorry. wrong screen again.
Would it be possible for us to see a rendering of the building from the 77th Street perspective and from the 76th Street perspective?
So the renderings that you're seeing here at this point are really the aspirational renderings we put together. We have a lot of more diagrammatic drawings, zoning related drawings, where we're doing the studies that basically study the amount of coverage, and I'll probably speak to this better, and the setback requirements. So I don't have anything to put up here today for you, but it's 2 stories, well, 2 high stories at that edge.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Linda, can I just add my voice to this? You and I had chatted about this briefly. I want to be clear. I've asked a lot of internal questions, and our team has been very direct in terms of this. I would go back to part of what we were talking about before, that we may not have exactly what you're seeking at this moment, but we will, and it will be passed along as quickly as possible. It's not like we have it sitting in a vault. It's evolving. It's based on these aspirational renderings. And I try and come at this as I can understand it and then translate it. So I think it's going to be a shorter period of time rather than longer to give you more of the detail that you're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next we have May Mullaney.
Anthony, by the way, I think Michelle Birnbaum has her hand raised.
No, I know that. We're doing all of the
Oh, yes, I'm
members of the
sorry.
public
I'm
first.
sorry. My
That's okay,
mistake.
Sharon.
I'm sorry.
Hi, so I live on 76th Street, right on the corner, 76th and 3rd. I am just curious what kind of foundations you're planning on doing. Are they going to be, if you can tell me that information, if it's going to be piles, is it bedrock underneath, just trying to get a sense of the noise and how loud it's going to be when they're driving the piles. Any information on that would be great.
So I don't know if I can answer that fully at this point because we're just gathering that subsurface information. It's not a very deep foundation, number one, I can tell you that. We do anticipate some rock, but it's not predominantly rock. There won't be traditional piles throughout the site. There might be some perimeter piles to hold back the edge. So there won't be a lot of pile driving, that I can tell you, but there will be some rock. I just can't tell you how much today. But the fact that it's not a very deep foundation is why we have kind of a short foundation schedule that John shared with you earlier. I hope that helps a little.
Yes, that does help. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Elaine Walsh.
Thank you. I live on East 79th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue. Grew up in the neighborhood. I have a couple of questions. Get to the real retail space. I would suggest that you look at your plans because originally you said you would have retail space, and every site on 3rd Avenue, new or old, has retail space because the avenue requires retail space. And what you've presented is not retail space. So I'd like you to go back and look at that because that is a requirement. The next question is on parking. There's an assumption people are just going to take a cab or whatever and get dropped off, or maybe take a subway, who knows? But why did you not consider parking underneath? I know it's a shallow foundation, but we are facing down the road with congestion pricing, fewer and fewer garages available for people to park or for people to park on the street because everybody else is going to want to be here. So if you could respond to the parking issue. The next question is, you talked about the loading bay, and I'm glad it was raised on 76th. Apparently the bay can take one truck at a time. how many trucks will be loading and standing, waiting to get in there? And I ask that because on Lenox Hill Hospital, that's a major issue with the lineup of trucks. A huge issue that has yet to be resolved. So I'd like some response to that. The other piece is, in the original plan, you had a partner who really owned the property and was going to be responsible for the construction. Is that still true? The other question is, on 76th Street, you're eliminating some parking. And even though you're not allowed to park where you're going to now use the space, the reality is when people are loading and unloading, that's where they're parked. On 77th Street, how many parking spaces will you be taking for the hospital? And I think those are about the end of my questions at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.
So I'll address two, or I'll address at least 1.5. Right now, we'll start with 1.5. But the owner of the property, the owner of record right now, is Tough Financing. Northwell has a contractual relationship with Tough Financing, and we have an ongoing obligation with them. We have an opportunity with them. They are the owner of record, and we have every expectation that we will be moving ahead, and we will either have a long-term lease on this property or we will become the owner of record. But obviously, we are the ones advancing this project. It is in full conformance with our agreement with Tough Financing. Tough Financing is an entity that does this type of work all across the country. It's well recognized. It's a standard operating procedure, and it enables us to work with them and through them, but also bring this application. And to be clear, this is a Northwell application. And I just want to made reference to the hospital. I'm assuming you're just talking about the parking on 77th Street, which 76, I'm sorry. Okay.
And 77.
77.
Both.
So I think a couple things. First, I would say it seems overwhelming that we're hearing from the community about the concern about retail from the safety component piece, from the neighborhood lively piece. And so certainly we can continue to have that discussion. I think, I'll reiterate again, that the design was really centered around the patient in this perspective, but we equally want to understand its community impact. So, further discussion on that, certainly we can entertain. The concept of what you brought up about the hospital, Elaine, you're spot on. We understand that the loading dock is not something that is well received by our neighbors. We are trying to mitigate that as much as possible currently. And that was also what went into this design, was understanding the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities that existed at Lenox Hill Hospital itself. How could we attempt to eliminate those pieces? And Jonathan spoke to the fact that we're going to try to do that in a couple different ways. As he mentioned, embody it all within the building. And secondly, really control the delivery patterns so there aren't trucks waiting like you have seen at the hospital proper. We don't want that to occur again, and certainly don't want that same component present. There was the parking on 77th.
Parking on 77th, we have no intention to eliminate any, ask for the reduction of any parking on 77th Street in relation to this building. I think, to put a finer point on, on what Dr. Baker had said, with the different type of functions of the building, we have the ability to control how how the materials are parsed and delivered into this building, being that it's not a 24/7 facility. So 7 days a week, that we have a much greater ability to control how we plan for and deliver materials to this building. So we can control that and work with our vendors to make sure that we don't line up, because we know what a problem it is on 76th Street up by Park Avenue.
Okay, if Turf Financing currently is the owner, is that a nonprofit?
Yes.
tough as a not-for-profit organization.
So the tax exemption continues, okay. I think on the retail space, I'm not just concerned about safety, and indeed with all the vacant stores, all avenues have gotten darker. I'm talking about what is required in the zoning for building on the avenue. My understanding is retail space is required on the ground floor. And I think that is something that we need no matter what. And whether it's you move your reception area up, it's not my job to tell you what to do, but it is a concern, a major concern, particularly since in the beginning, you did have retail space there when we asked about it. I'm going to go back 2 years, 3 years, whatever it was, on that issue. So I think that's important for you to go back and look at and bring back to us a plan for retail on the ground floor, and then move your other up a flight. I've been in other hospitals where when you come in, you take an escalator up. It's a mezzanine. It's not even a real floor, whatever. So I would suggest that you definitely do that. Thank you.
Elaine, I'm seated right next to Paul, and we will obviously go back and review very directly what you are speaking to.
Thank you.
And thank you, Elaine. Okay, we now have Shan and Jason. There you go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you very much. I live at 201 East 77th Street, so I'm, right across the street from this. And I had more of a question just, I guess, about the construction process. And I guess one question was raised about the noise, which obviously, I understand it's going to be loud, but can you speak to, is construction only going to be happening during business hours? Will it occur on the weekends? I had a terrible experience long ago where I lived somewhere where there's a construction site going basically all night. So I'm hoping that's not going to happen. And then another question just related to the construction would be, I guess, what phases of it are going to be the most kind of noisy and, obstructive? I don't know how all this construction equipment comes in, where all the materials go. I mean, is there going to be periods of time where this is really, causing a huge issue in the area for months? So it's kind of more just questions around, I guess, the process of building this. Thank you very much.
So just an outline of the schedule that we had up on the slide before. The demolition of that one remaining 2-story building is scheduled to start in November. That's a pretty low impact activity. Excavation foundation is scheduled to start in the spring in March. And that's where you would see excavation equipment, concrete trucks. Depending on the rock, like I talked about before, tends to be the noisiest part of the whole project. But it's not the longest part, thank goodness. And then after that, there's a superstructure part where we're bringing concrete and installing floors that are basically made of concrete and not steel, which is actually a quieter element. We do anticipate, working with, typically the approved DOB hours, Monday to Friday, 7 to 6. There will be occasional weekend work. That's kind of hard to tell right now what that's going to be. We're very, very early in the process. But we do have, like I said before, noise mitigation requirements as well as air quality requirements that we have to follow. And we're pretty strictly regulated by DOT, DOB, DEP, Con Ed, the fire department. There's quite a lot of, policies and procedures that we do have to abide by. I don't know if that answers your question, sufficiently.
And just to add to that a little bit, I just also want to point out that we will continue throughout this project, as we have been, communicating on a regular basis with the community about what we anticipate will be happening. That we'll be saying, over the next 2 weeks, we anticipate that we will be cutting into rock because it's that point of the demolition work, or we're going to start pouring concrete this week for the superstructure. We will be sending out 2-week look aheads to the community on a regular basis, as we have been doing, throughout, throughout the past, at least past year and a half, that we started during the initial demolition of the site. And we also, as we put up on the screen earlier, have a website that is dedicated to this. And we will also be putting those 2-week look aheads on a page of that website that you'll be able to link to as well, so that we're constantly communicating. And then we also intend, if there is something that changes within that 2-week period, we'll do additional update to the community because something's changed, and we want to make sure you understand. There was a weather event or something, so we had to change the schedule a bit, and we want to make sure that we stay in as much contact with you as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you. We now have Rhett Brown.
Great. Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes. Great. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you so much. And thank you for all the information. So one question. So first of all, I live 205 East 76th Street. This is the building immediately adjacent to the east of the proposed structure. The question is, on the 76th Street facade, do you have a rendering of what that is expected to look like? And will it resemble in any way the kind of facade dock, I guess, that exists at Lenox Hill on 76 between Park and Lexington? Thank you.
Oh, okay. I will say that it will be it will not at all resemble a loading dock that you currently see at Lenox Hill Hospital. The goal is for this, really, as we talk about it, and is for it to disappear as much as we can into the building, so that it's not screaming, this is a loading dock. I don't know that we have a true rendering of.
It'll look a lot like the one on 72nd Street.
Right, but then you'll have the.
But with the loading.
You'll have the loading.
Yeah,
But that is something that we should be able to get back to the community with relatively quickly. Is getting back to you all with what that facade would look like based off. I know we were talking about that earlier with Linda about having kind of true looks on what the facade looks like from 77th and what it looks like on 76th. So we will work to get back to you with that as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Rhett. Leah Hanlon.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I'm not really certain that you answered Elaine Walsh's question about parking. So let me try it again. You're not putting parking in the building. And how do you anticipate not only patients, but also doctors and staff to be arriving at the building? Have you considered that? It doesn't seem to be reflected in your design. And as you know, there's a lot of community concern about the decreasing amounts of parking in the neighborhood and the effect of congestion pricing.
So I think we'll parse this out in a couple different pieces. I know that we did take a look at the parking, and it was considered. I don't want people to think that we didn't consider it. In many ways, it would be liked for a multitude of reasons. And I'll let those that are much smarter than me about architectural building explain how it really wasn't feasible to do. The piece with regard to entering the building, a couple different aspects. Right now at Lenox Hill Hospital, we have a valet service for individuals dropping off and coming and going. We intend to do the same piece in front of this site as well and echo that concept so that we eliminate some component pieces of that, utilizing some of the same parking spaces in again, that valet service that we already do, so it's not additive. With regard to individuals who work in the building, when we look at those who work at Lenox Hill Hospital and individuals who work at a lot of our different outpatient sites right now, the overwhelming majority actually come by transit. And we're anticipating they would continue to take either the 6 or now also to be able to take the 2nd Avenue line, so that it might even reduce some congestion on the 6, which I'm sure many people, including myself, would appreciate. So that's really when we're looking at the team members who are going to come in the building. There's not an anticipation that there will be an increase, a substantial increase in traffic and parking from that standpoint. I don't know.
I mean, we did, as you suggested, we did look at, we did look at that early on. We were requested to do some space studies early on, which we did. And the site itself is not that large, and it would have required multiple floors. And that said, between the parking ramp, the entrance, the exit, and then the cores associated, I mean, the elevators to get from there, you weren't actually really going to get that many spots. And that in combination with wanting to bring materials into the building, there really wasn't enough space in the footprint to accommodate all those desires as well.
And I think also just to put a finer, another point on what Marissa was talking about, when we cross compared what we could actually get in parking in the building with what it would take for us to get it, as we've talked about, you know, that we do, the site does sit on bedrock, and the fact that we could get pretty much 1 story down without very significant interaction with the bedrock. But if we were going to look to get any significant parking in the building, we would have had to go down another 2 to 3 stories, and that would have all been in bedrock and would have had required us to excavate a significant amount of bedrock to achieve that, which probably would have added another 6 to 8 months to our schedule. We would have had to start getting into blasting. We would have, it would have had a pretty significant impact on the community from what we viewed as a pretty insignificant volume of parking in the building once we got through all of the support you need to provide that parking.
And where do the valets put the cars of people using that service?
So, yeah.
We currently work with a parking garage on 77th Street, where we have agreements with them to provide the valet service for us, and we rent a block of parking spaces from that garage that we have now for multiple years.
Yes.
Will you be renting a bigger block?
No, our intention is not to increase that block at this time.
Okay, great. That answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Andy Gaspar is next. Wait a minute, you have to unmute. There
Here
you
we
go.
Good evening. I'm Andy Gaspar. I live on the corner of 77th and Park, and I'm one of the founders of the committee that was formed to oppose the plans that Lenox Hill originally put forward on its current site. I will start by saying that you guys are a breath of fresh air, and I am delighted at the attitude that you've taken in approaching this project. The community is not your enemy. The community wants to be your friend. We have some very useful and strong views of what we think our community needs, both in terms of services and facilities, and we'd like to help you accomplish your goals, not oppose them. And I'm delighted by this first attempt to do that. In one of your slides, you showed all of the facilities that Northwell owns in Manhattan and as well as in the city of New York. And there was talk in days past of Northwell developing a campus-like atmosphere here in our neighborhood. You guys filed plans for a single building, and we understand that's what you need for city approval. But in point of fact, Northwell owns lots of other properties. So this question, for example, of parking, clearly it's become a larger and larger problem in the neighborhood. It does not have to be solved in the building that you're building right now. To the extent that you own other properties in the neighborhood, garage space could be provided elsewhere. I'm somewhat interested in the relationship between this building and Lenox Hill Hospital. You're going to share electronic records. I'm curious, what are you going to share? Will there be a little shuttle going back and forth? What should we expect in our neighborhood as the interaction between the two facilities?
So I can start at the last part. I will thank you for your comments. First of all, I really appreciate what you've said. And equally, I think we're looking to be good community partners, as you indicated. We understand the strong views and why they're there, and we are very respectful of those and want to, again, continue to work together. When we take a look at how these buildings interact in terms of Third Avenue and Lenox Hill Hospital, what I was trying to speak to in the presentation is that the concept of inpatient and outpatient care is very complementary of each other, but it really is a separate entity in terms of what it's able to provide clinically and why it should really be separate. We are going to share the health records. We intend for it all to be under one electronic medical record. We would like the care to be entirely seamless as you might transition between inpatient into outpatient care. That's something that we know we can improve on as an industry in and of itself, but something that we have full intention of providing, particularly with this, looking at all those different aspects for how we can really engage our patients so that you have access equally to your own patient information, as do your clinicians to be able to provide you with the best possible care. So that seamless integration of the medical information across any aspect of these buildings is intended to occur. We have not any plans at the moment to have a shuttle that's going back and forth between the two. We're not anticipating that there's going to be a huge traffic volume of individuals that will have to go between the two because, again, of the complementary nature of the care that's provided at each site. So that we're trying to put everything that you would need as a patient receiving care in Third Avenue so that you don't need to leave. And again, we wrap you in that and allow for you to get everything that you need to have happen. That's where imaging will be present in the building. You won't need to go to the hospital to have any imaging done. The multiple services that are present also are able to do that. And we're very hopeful to really capitalize on the concept of the telehealth and virtual component aspects of care that we introduced during COVID to widespread effect, to be able to bring that in a more robust nature equally to anything that we don't have in the building so that we allow for that communication. We're hopeful that that actually occurs on for our clinicians as well, as how are they able to communicate to individuals and doctors that are at the hospital rather than just through telephone or walking or anything of that aspect. That we're really set up this understanding for how they can almost be present as a mind in offering the thoughtfulness they need to at each site simultaneously.
Well, you're clearly going to have other impacts on the neighborhood. Let's start with the subway. You're going to bring people not only by car, but by train as well. As we've heard in Lenox Hill's plans, the subway is currently inadequate to serve the traffic that it has. I'd like to strongly urge you to participate in that transit study and figure out what your project can do to provide better access and more access to the existing subway lines, which are going to be served. I'm also impressed that the facility is 200,000 square feet. That's a lot of space. And I would think that the plans that Lenox Hill originally filed, and which we'll hear an update on one of these days, will be reduced by 200,000 square feet, since you're performing some vital functions that they were previously going to provide in that block. So again, I think this is part of an ongoing conversation. We can help you in many different ways, and we welcome you to keep doing these sessions with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for your insight, Mr. Gasper.
Thank you, Andy. We now have Pallavi.
I think they unmuted themselves again. But they can't unmute again. Pallavi, if you're here, you can unmute.
All right, let's skip to Victoria Hamilton and we'll come back.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Hello. Thank you all very much for this community board meeting and presentation by Northwell. I'm most appreciative. I live across the street from the construction site on 3rd Avenue. And I'm concerned for another reason. I see a great deal of glass. And I know that in Midtown in the 50s, high 50s, they've had a lot of problems with falling glass when there are high winds. And also, I already see a great deal of very bright reflection in the afternoons when the sun hits glass from nearby buildings. So I'm concerned that that's also going to happen on this building. And what is going to be done so that we don't have to worry about falling glass or so much reflection, because it is a very large expanse.
So
Thank you.
I'd like to say we'd like nothing to fall off this building
Yeah.
to begin with, but understand your concern.
I mean, I could take a shot and then if you want, you
Go
can
for
take. I'll try to address all the concerns, and then if I forget to respond, please remind me of what I forgot to respond to. I will say that as the architects, we have a very robust team of consultants. And the consultants, along with the construction team, go through significant engineering, mock-up testing, all sorts of above and beyond requirements to ensure the safety of the glass. From a falling perspective, we also have, wind engineers, acoustic engineers. We do solar studies for reflection, a lot of the concerns you brought up. And the design really goes through significant engineering from all those perspectives. It's not just strength, it's also the sound and reflectivity and things like that. And selections are made based on those studies. So it's a very thorough process where we really hope to minimize any of the impacts that you're speaking of. We won't fall. I'm sorry to hear about the falling glass, but we have really strong partners on our construction team and thorough testing and inspection that goes with that.
I'm just concerned because I'm sure that the buildings between 57th and 59th on the west side that have that problem must have done a lot of studies as well, yet they still have falling glass whenever there's, high winds or there's very low temperatures and ice forming. So I'm concerned about ice formation as well.
We actually have a consultant for that as well. And that actually is not a consultant that every project carries. So it's called Snow, Wind and Ice Consultant. So I'm so sorry, I can't speak to that project, but I can tell you that, we take all those items seriously and we bring on partners to help us thoroughly investigate any of those potential issues and resolve them before they happen.
You could add to the performance test.
Okay, thank you.
We have a performance test.
The performance test is an off-site facility where they actually test how the glass gets installed, how it's secured. They put it through all kinds of tension and torsion for that exact reason. They make sure it doesn't leak. They test it against wind, structurally. So it's a very significant test that's done a year before the glass ever shows up on the building. It's tested in a third-party facility. So it's very intense testing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Now let's try Pallavi again. See if they can unmute.
Okay, I think I'm on there now. Thank you so much for such a great presentation. I'm really proud to be in a neighborhood that would think so visionary and futuristic. I live on 76th and 2nd Avenue. And one of the problems lately has been safety of pedestrians. And that corner in particular, the crossroad of 3rd and 76th, has had fatalities, and to the point where they've now made a 4-way stop so that pedestrians can cross. I'm wondering how the safety of pedestrians will reflect as construction goes and as the hospital goes up.
So I would say just a couple of basic things. That you suggested where you live, we have a middle school right on that block as well. We have a school on the other side. We care about everyone who's there. When we met with the people who would actually be doing the work for us, we went with the labor unions, I tell you the first thing that they talked about was safety. That's the first thing they talked about for everyone on site, all their workers, and the work that was being done. So I think the focus on the pedestrians is well stated, but I know that there's going to be a very super high sensitivity given the fact that we know we have not only senior population in the area, but we have a lot of young kids and families. Last couple of days, I was walking up and down these blocks, and you see the families out in the morning with parents taking their kids to school. You know, it's not lost on any of us, the concerns that you're raising. And, you know, I was thinking back to the prior comment about the glass and things like that. Obviously, we care very deeply about the people that we take care of, but I'll remind everybody that we have 27,000 employees of Northwell who live in these very same neighborhoods. So we share the legitimate concerns that are raised. That's an issue that can be raised. We can do this in concert, not only with this board, but with our elected officials and the police department.
Okay.
Just to add from a construction standpoint, to reiterate what John said, you know, safety is our primary concern as well. And the public is number one. So, you know, don't just throw up a fence and hope that's sufficient. We actually have to build a fence that's designed by a structural engineer to separate the work activities from the public. We also put up a sidewalk bridge that is also structurally designed and lit 24/7. So our intention is to keep those sidewalks completely accessible at all times. And if and when we have to cross a sidewalk with construction activity, it will have proper flag people at all times. And that's part of a plan that we need to submit to the city amongst other plans, you know, for their review and approval. So it's a pretty robust planning that takes place to address those concerns.
Thank you. Jeffrey Engel.
Hi, how are you? I'm Jeffrey Engel, and I live on 77th Street towards the construction site facing it, and I've been in the neighborhood since 1999. A lot of my concerns have been raised today and talked about. I think Northwell is great, by the way. Every time I've used one of your facilities, it's worked out fantastic. Your doctors are great. Parking's a big issue. We've talked about it. It's unfortunate that you couldn't solve your parking needs with your building. And I'd like to make up another issue wasn't talked about is the handing out of parking permits to your doctors. As it stands right now, many days are the streets in front of where I live taken in the morning of street sweeping by doctors driving BMWs from Lenox Hill Hospital with emergency surgery plates. And they're there all day, maybe to the next day. They come in the morning when people have to leave and they put their car, they can't be ticketed. Can we get a limit of parking passes, not only for the new facility, but also for the people in Lenox Hill? Because, you know, those people probably, you know, don't need to be parking on the street and taking up spots like that. And I have one question after that.
Yeah, Mr. Engel, I really appreciate what you're saying. And I would say the limit actually in terms of the placards that we give out is now 0. So we don't provide placards to the physicians. They actually have to go through the state regulations of getting MD plates in order to park in any MD designated areas for parking. So As of about 3/4 of through last year, we stopped producing any of the placards. We actually worked with the city on this and the 19th precinct in understanding and educating our physicians that the presence of the placard also would allow for a second ticket in addition to illegal parking. So there would be a ticket for illegal parking and a ticket for a essentially that was previously provided by us. So that is not something that we provide for anymore. If you see those, I apologize. They should not be present. We don't provide them any longer, and we'll work to reiterate that piece. The component of the MD plate, obviously we can't control. That's through the Department of Transportation on that piece. But I know that parking, particularly by the physicians, is certainly something that is a concern for the community, and we will continue to work with you and with them on that.
I'm happy that you are aware of that. Good answer. As far as meeting space available to the community, the person who raised that issue, I know my college built a new building. They had meeting space for the community in their campus center. Why can't we have something like that so we don't have to ask Birch Waltham or other places to meet when we do have meetings?
I didn't hear the first part of
and just to clarify what we had briefly touched on earlier, but we probably didn't go into it enough detail. It will be a conference center within this building that we will make available for community groups and for after hours groups that they can use in a couple of different locations within this building. I think it probably got a little overshadowed about the conversation with the teaching kitchen for nutrition and things like that. But there will be meeting space within this building that will be able to be utilized by the community.
Great. I hope that your construction plans go well, because with the city going to congestion pricing, unless we can change the people in Albany, it's going to be very crowded up here with people looking for parking spaces, cement mixers, the like. There's projects right over here on 2nd Avenue and 76th Street. There's going to be yours. There's the one down on by Citarella. It's just all over the place. It's going to be a mess. Is there going to be some sort of religious chapel inside the building?
We don't have any plans for any religious or non-denominational meditative space. Certainly a great thought and something that we can consider in terms of how do we utilize space differently to incorporate that. We have recently introduced that to the hospital proper, but we hadn't had that with this building not necessarily operating on a 24/7 piece. Weren't thinking that that was going to be something that would be a mainstay of use. But it's a wonderful thought.
Great. Well, thank you for your time, and thanks for being available to hear your new neighbors.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Sylvia, and then we are going to unusually call on Elaine again, and then we'll go to committee members.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I'm Sylvia. I live on 205 East 77th Street. Just one very simple question, actually two. First one is that, the staff entrance on 77th Street, in the rendering on page 10 of your deck, that looks like a low rise, right? In fact, I think you have confirmed that that's a low rise. That's correct? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So my question is, does the low rise go all the way to 76th Street? That's the question number one.
That's at the top, but it's not at the actual entrance of the staff.
It actually, it does. Well, it does. The shape of the lot isn't exactly rectangular, but it is low for that whole length.
No, she's asking if it comes out the street. If I'm understanding you correctly, Sylvia, you're asking if the staff entrance comes out to the street wall? Or if
I'm sorry, I can you say that again?
I think she's asking if it's low
right
in that whole sort of zone.
I think she's asking if the rear portion of the building is low all the way from 76 to 77.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
no problem.
All the way from 76.
It is, and in fact, it doesn't go the whole length, because then there's actually an inner courtyard without anything. And then there's an existing building that kind of aligns with it.
Right. So the existing building is actually 5 to 6 story tall. So basically, in terms of elevation, it will go from 2-story all the way to the existing building, which is 5 or 6 story. That means that part is unchanged in terms of elevation, right?
Correct.
Something like that?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Then my second question is about the retail again. I noticed that that is a very significant subject tonight. So I'm going to give my 2 cents. But just now, somebody said, and I guess that would totally make sense, that in fact, zoning requires you have retail on the ground floor on 3rd Avenue. This is what somebody said. I'm just verifying this now. So are you saying that you already have a variance from DOB or whoever you get variance from not to put retail for your building on 3rd Avenue? Hello? Hello?
To find out some information that may address
Which is ground floor uses in certain high density commercial districts. That section by its terms applies only to developments in predominantly residential use. And that is developments that are more than 50% residential in their floor area. We are a community facility development. It doesn't apply to us.
I'm sorry, I'm not following you at all. You're not talking to the mic. If you don't mind, can you say that again?
I'll try it again. The section that we believe is referenced here is 32.435. That section addresses ground floor uses in high density commercial districts. And it applies to buildings that are more than 50% residential. Those are the buildings that are required to have retail uses at the base. Buildings that are have community facility uses, such as this one, are not subject to this regulation.
Okay, understood. So you don't need a variance. All right, thank you. But nevertheless, I want to reiterate our very strong feeling that we really would like to see some retail space in that block on ground floor. I just want to reiterate that, which has been expressed the whole night already. I'm sure you're tired of hearing about it, but anyway, here you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Elaine.
Thank you for letting me follow up on the parking. I understand what you're saying about why you financially do not want to do any indoor parking. But it was raised about how Lenox Hill's staff park in the neighborhood and have signage that permits them to park. We have it on Park Avenue between 76th and 77th. We have it in 77th. We have it in 76th between Lex and Park. I would ask that you not ask the city for signage that would permit parking for your medical staff, because that will take up a huge amount of parking in our community, given the lack of not only parking spaces, but also garage space. The next part was, and Andrew, thank you for raising the subway and the elevator. The hospital talked about putting an elevator on the south side, I believe, of Lex to go to the subway. I would ask, and I think the community would ask, that you consider as a contribution to the community, putting in an elevator that would then go north, because your staff live north and south, as do the patients you will have. So I really would like you to look at that. And finally, yes, indeed, when it is residential, it is required for retail space. You are a community facility. We have so many of them that come into the definition of community facilities, whether it's a doctor's office or this or that or whatever. A contribution to our community would be since we are a mixed use predominantly area, and you are going to be changing the landscape and the context of Third Avenue between 76th and 77th, and making us more of an institutional setting that we have not had on the Third Avenue road, that you consider and reconsider and redesign your building to allow for retail that will meet the needs of the community. In other community facility definitions, it is required that there be, and this is on other avenues, stores put in that meet the local needs of the neighborhood. So I ask you, as a native-born Yorkville person, born also in Lenox Hill Hospital, that you listen to us and make a commitment that the hospital, when it was built, served immigrants and everybody else, that you now come and meet the needs of our local community and do something about the retail space. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Elaine. I'm not sure that needed a further comment, but you guys are welcome to speak if you'd like.
Anthony, all I would say is thank you to Elaine. It's a consistent message echoed by many of the people here. You know, we're all very cognizant of what's been shared, and we'll have these discussions, but we're more than happy to listen to anything that's offered.
Okay. All right, now we're going to go to committee members. First would be Michelle, who has been very patient, and her arm is probably tired from having her hand up for so long.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I've enjoyed listening. Everybody raised excellent points, and our presenters are doing a wonderful job and being very forthcoming, and I really appreciate that. I have a few questions. I can pose them all at once. That may speed things up. Firstly, I noted that your mechanicals are on the lower floors, and with the experience that NYU Langone had during our last hurricane, where their mechanicals were on the lower floors and were completely flooded, and they have since moved their mechanicals to the roof. I suspect you probably have some on the higher floors and roof as well, but you do have them in the basement and on the lower floor. Can you just address whether or not you are concerned about the decision, or, you know, briefly, I won't get into your major engineering reports, but it was stark to me in light of our concerns.
So sure, Michelle, just to quickly, talk to that. We actually have pretty limited mechanical in the basement level of our building. What we have in the basement are the points of entry from all of the different utilities. And we have our primary mechanical and distribution actually on the second floor of this building. So we did take that into account and try to keep as much up and out of the basement level as possible. But unfortunately, in New York City, everything comes in underground. So we have to have some semblance of mechanical receiving point at that lower level. And we then look to express that up to the second floor for the primary distribution of those utilities.
Which brings me.
I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
An important, also critical fact is we've studied a lot of what's happened at NYU, and we are not actually in the same flood zone, and significantly above. And we study those maps very thoroughly, and we make accommodations as required for the points of entry, for the safety of the equipment that is still below grade because of the point of entry, and then everything else is well above the floodplain.
Okay, so two more questions about mechanicals. How do they add to the overall height of the building if you have some on the roof? You have your building is what, 225? And what is the height of the building, including roof mechanicals?
Mm-hmm. So including roof mechanicals, we're actually capped at a height limit per zoning, so we meet that requirement. There is a little bit of a bulkhead, which is a permitted obstruction, which Paul can speak to better, which does go above that to about 250.
I'm sorry, but your mic is fading out. What is your overall height? I didn't get that number.
To the top of the mechanical level is 215 feet.
Okay, including the mechanicals. Now, when we talk about the street and electrical or water will have to be brought to the building, how do you anticipate how much breaking up of Third Avenue and or the side streets do you anticipate or do you already know about for Con Ed and for whomever in order to bring service to your building? You're going to be breaking up the streets, and do you know how long those projects?
During construction? Then I'll let you speak to that.
Construction.
Well, I think we're talking about bringing in water. Con
Yeah,
Ed,
bringing in,
right? All the utility, the permanent utilities to the building would be brought in, I guess, predominantly from Third Avenue. I don't know if we have all of that information yet, but that's generally where the existing utilities are.
Correct.
They have to come into the footprint. I don't think we have a choice there. I don't know if we have anything coming in from 76 or 77th, right? Unlikely.
So can you anticipate what length of time, how long those streets would, Third Avenue would be broken up, and at what stage of your construction that would happen?
I wish I could answer that, but I honestly cannot because I don't have a handle on what we're doing yet.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, Michelle, we literally have met with Con Edison as recently as yesterday and starting to talk about the planning for how they can provide us services, not only from a permanent perspective, but also from a temporary power perspective during construction. And they're very engaged with us, but they're but they're also trying to figure out how it fits in their schedule and where they'll be able to provide us the services that we require to bring into the building. So we don't exactly know where it's going to fit into our schedule at this point yet, but we have already engaged with these utilities to try to push that along so we can have that understanding.
Okay, so when you do know that, if you just put that in your 2-week,
It will absolutely be in those. Yep, 100% will be in those lookouts.
Yeah, because that will affect traffic and everything. Now, going to 76th Street, where you have your service entrance, which can have one truck, you say, which you have control over because it's basically coming from your own facility, which is great. But typically, if a big truck, if it isn't just like a 10-foot, 12-foot box truck, if it's a big truck, it needs a turning radius or a back-end radius on 76th Street. So while you will need available space on either side of your entrance on the north side, you will probably need parking spaces to be eliminated on the south side so that your truck can back in.
And we actually have discussed that, and it is something that we are studying in advance of our conversation with the DOT to understand exactly how we can best make this work with the smallest impact on the parking that currently exists.
It would have, if you have control over the size of the trucks that you use, that would be helpful.
And
if that's something within your control, if it's not a truck that has to fork knife, then it wouldn't need available space opposite the entrance. So
that's exactly part of our study, Michelle, is that we're doing that study in tandem with our internal distribution group to see what our truck limitations would be based on turn radiuses, et cetera.
Great, because just want to put all this stuff on your radar. Glad it already is, but the more it is, the better. With construction, with your schedule, you're going to have to at some point line up cement trucks. And we know that the cement trucks have to be lined up and they have to keep turning. So are you going to close a lane? Have you made a plan as to how you're going to line up your cement trucks? Will they have to wait on a block south of 3rd Avenue in order to come in front of your facility? Do you know how many you'll have at one time? What impact will that have? Because that will take up a complete lane of traffic on 3rd Avenue.
First of all, Michelle, I want to know if you're available for hire because I'd like you to help me put my schedule and logistics plan together. You're asking really, really good questions. We don't have a handle on the amount of trucks or where they're coming from yet because we haven't bought any of this work. We don't know which concrete suppliers we're going to use, say, for the superstructure. We can say that nearly all of our logistics are on 3rd Avenue. that's where the hoist will be. So trucks will be coming up Third Avenue to get to the site and avoiding 76th and 77th. So yes, they have to come south to north, but we haven't figured out exactly how they're going to be staged yet. It's a great question. I'm just not prepared to answer it today, but it's definitely something that we do have to thoroughly plan out.
Okay, great. Again, putting it on your radar. So we'll look forward to hearing it in the future. Also bear in mind that the DOT is looking to reconfigure Third Avenue. Our transportation committee is going to hear something about that at our October meeting. So at some point you may need to coordinate with them. Not so sure because the traffic flow is going to be a big deal. Now you have a last couple of questions and that's it. You have a canopy suggested for Third Avenue. What kind of canopy will it be and what kind of signage are you proposing for the front of the building? And I'm assuming that that will be your only patient entrance. The side entrance that you have on the side street on 77th is for staff, not a main entrance. But what kind of signage and what are you proposing for lighting and signage with that canopy? And how far will it protrude from the front of the building onto the sidewalk?
I'm going to be honest, we have not studied that level of detail of signage and wayfinding on that canopy at this point. The material is really developed for the rendering to show that there would be an entry. I think the material is still being developed. The lighting strategy is being developed. The signage strategy is being developed. So I think I'm probably not really prepared to answer that.
Okay, so let me just say that as
concern, maybe let me know what that is.
No, I was going to just say, so going forward, as you do look at it and as you do develop it, to be mindful that the signage is not too intrusive, that the lighting is not too intrusive because you have buildings that are facing you and a canopy will probably be lit 24/7, that it be with a dimmer and that you just be mindful of the community's concerns about that. And
I think we can pretty safely tell you that our goal is to provide lighting to the exterior of the building that provides a feeling of light to the street, but it's not going to be super obtrusive. We know that when we started working on the construction fencing, that we wanted to provide lighting for safety and security around the block. We will continue that, but I will tell you, we're not going to put a big neon sign on the front of the building that's blaring, bright colors 24 hours a day. It will be tastefully done. It will be done respectful to the community and not overly bright, not overly lit, just something that strikes a balance between dark and a feeling of safety and some semblance of light around the building at the sidewalk level.
great. So you're not planning for any uplighting?
Onto the building?
Onto the facade of the building, no uplighting?
No,
I don't have a plan.
Yeah.
Okay. And my very last two things. One, I know you're mindful of rat traps when you start to excavate. Be mindful of rat mitigation. I think that's probably required. And I just want to put one thing in with when your construction begins. We know that the construction hours start at 7. However, AM. However, there's been a lot of concern, and I myself have experienced the discomfort of the construction crew gathering at the site, being very prompt. Many times they are early. And while they might not start the first jackhammer or the first activity until exactly 7 o'clock, the fact that they start to gather or that they bring trucks in, and then if they back them up, you have that beep, 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 beep sound at 6:30 in the morning. So to just please be mindful that if construction is starting at 7 a.m., that there is quiet prior to the 7 a.m. hour. And that's in terms of people talking or shouting or trucks or anything like that. Just please, when you brief your crew and all that, please be mindful of that actually nothing should be heard prior to that 7 a.m. hour strike. Okay, no, I
Thank
think
you,
they're frozen.
Michelle.
Actually,
Well,
I
that
think
was a
they're
comment.
frozen. I think they're
Oh, they
frozen. But
did
anyway,
freeze.
I just put that out there. Hopefully you heard me. Thank you very much. And again, thanks for being so forthcoming. I appreciate it.
All right, next we have, thank you, Michelle. We have Sharon Pope Marshall.
Are they still frozen?
They appear to still be frozen, although they might just be shocked at the thought of quiet before 7 a.m.
They're going to log out and they're going to log back in to resolve that
Okay.
issue. But they did freeze. That's what I just read. So I guess give it a couple more.
Thank you, Zachary. So we have Sharon, and then we have Adam and Judy and Craig later.
I'd like to say something about that just very briefly. Everything you plan is just right in the construction and so on, but you will find that some construction workers will humiliate you, and that perhaps if you have an emergency number and a hospital has somebody around all the time, for the community to call when they start using their drills at 3 a.m, somebody to call and maybe stop that, I would suggest.
That's a good idea, and we can probably repeat that once our friends come back online, and they're not back yet, are they, Zachary?
I do not see them yet.
Okay.
Zachary, can you hear us now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Is that the Lennox Hill
Okay,
team?
so go ahead, Sharon.
No, I wanted to give Elizabeth a chance to.
Oh, okay.
Zachary,
Yeah.
can you hear us?
Yeah,
Yes.
we hear you. We hear you now.
No.
I just wanted Elizabeth to repeat her comments and give the team a chance to hear her comments.
Oh, wait a minute, we're walking.
Oh, I think they're just moving places. Now we can see.
Getting reset up. Go ahead, Elizabeth. No, well, they appear to have frozen.
I thought you were looking for Elizabeth Rose.
No, we're looking
No,
for
you,
you,
Elizabeth. No, just to repeat your comments, because the Lennox Hill team didn't hear you.
Repeat what I said, that with the best will in the world, you're going to have some humiliating things to happen to you by your construction workers. And I was suggesting that you had a complaint line 24 hours or something like that, with the hospitals are open 24 hours a day, so that shouldn't be a problem. Something that people can call when there are loud noises at 3 a.m. when they get the pneumatic drills out at 3 a.m. or whatever it is, to torment you and your neighbors. So I'm merely just suggesting a telephone emergency line to respond to that.
Right. Thank you, Elizabeth, but it appears they have disappeared again.
Yeah, I think they're having severe technical issues because the second person. Okay, I think they're
They're
back.
so polite. Yes, they are.
Yes,
It's okay. All right. They will come back, I'm sure, in a moment or two. I was going to be doing something after this about the city's interactive zoning and land use map, but I think we will put that off till next month, given the already lateness of the hour and the fact we have at least 4 more board members who wish to speak.
That's a good suggestion.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Yes.
We hear you.
Oh, we got back.
Recording in progress.
Okay, Sharon, go ahead.
I really want to thank the Lenox Hill team for their presentation, as well as the degree of outreach that they have orchestrated thus far. And it really is a map of how to do things right in this city. With that said, Community Board 8, to paraphrase a community board member, I heard this first from her. Community Board 8 suffers from an embarrassment of riches. We have world-class health facilities, almost at our door. And right in this area, you'll have Memorial Sloan Kettering expanding its footprint. You'll have the Blood Center expanding its footprint. And you'll have your own construction. What happens is that people do forget that Community Board 8 is actually a community. It's actually made up of residents in this community. And so I have a couple of suggestions with that in mind, as well as a couple of questions. Suggestions first. I want to add my voice. Please, please, please create some type of ground floor retail, as Wendy mentioned, as Sylvia mentioned, as Elaine mentioned, and as so many other people mentioned. That really will go a long way, I think, in making sure that this is not just a project, but a project that is thoroughly integrated within the community. My second suggestion is offer the employees who will be in this building, offer them subsidized transit passes and also subsidize bike share, so that they can commute to this facility using a variety of modalities, transit modalities. You get what I'm saying? To get to their place of work.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have a couple of questions as well. First is on page 10, you indicate that you have 194,000 square feet of floor area, and that some of that is in that it includes floor area that was transferred from 205 East 76th Street. I'm curious to know how much of the 194,000 square feet is comprised of floor area that was transferred over to this development. That's one question. And the second question is, could Northwell have achieved its overall development objective without the transferred floor area? So if I do have a couple more questions, but I'll stop there. And if you could answer that question, I really would appreciate it.
The floor area transferred is 11,800 square feet
Okay.
plus or minus.
Mhm.
That's-
Okay.
And I should say historically, the floor area that was transferred very early in the assemblage process. I don't know whether Northwell even had an interest in the site at the time it was transferred, but it shows up as a very, very early transfer before the whole site was assembled.
Okay. Thank you. Now, so on page 6, making multidisciplinary outpatient care more accessible to New Yorkers. You guys, you have to help me with this. How many patients would this facility serve on a daily basis?
So you did a fine job with the word. For me, it's part of my vocabulary. I don't know that I have an answer exactly on the total number of patients that we have planned in terms of who will access this building in total. We are combining some of our physicians that are from different sites and growing a little bit in terms of making certain that we have this ability to do the comprehensive care model in a building like this where everything can be offered to the patient, but equally we want to be mindful of being available in the communities equally to where patients want to be and to receive care, and that there's a dichotomy there that we need to honor and be respectful of. We can certainly get some numbers to you. I think we could probably do some addition and then understand what that's going to look like pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Just a ballpark figure, especially on a daily basis. I think it's good to know what we're looking at here, actually on a day-to-day basis. And I'd like to add my voice as well to Elizabeth's recommendation that there be a telephone number that people can call on a daily basis, or hopefully not on a daily basis, but a 24-hour hotline that they could call to report any incidents or violations. I think you will agree that it's best that you hear about it first and that you rectify it first. And that's it for me, Anthony.
Thank you, Sharon.
Sharon,
great
there will
question.
be a phone number. We will have
Okay.
a phone number for your use. We will make sure that it's out for everyone's use. And I'm sorry we don't have it right now, but we will definitely have a phone number.
Yes, and by the way, I really would like to thank your team, especially because it's not very often that everyone shows up en masse, able to answer specific questions. And as I was listening, it's really phenomenal that you were able to get everyone together so that almost whatever question that we had, someone was able to answer it, Johnny, on the spot. And thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Sharon, they did that because they knew I was presenting and they were afraid I couldn't answer anything. So we brought it to them.
I can't believe that's true, John. I can't believe that's true.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Sharon. Now we have Adam Wald.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you, Northwell team. One comment and then a question. The first comment is that, parking. You have Extel is building 400,000 feet of medical space just a few blocks away, and they're planning no parking. The garage space at Hampton House, 404 East 79th Street, closed. That was parking. So not only there's more medical space being built, but parking garages are going away in the neighborhood. And that's just my comment. My question is this site eligible for transit bonus? If so, could a higher density be achieved? And could you maintain the same programming while also providing retail and or additional parking or space programming that would be useful to the community?
I'll take a crack at answering that question. The site is in a location that it would be eligible for a transit bonus relative to the 77th Street subway station. That bonus would not be as of right. That bonus would require a public review process. And
We'd approve it, Paul. We'd approve it if you fix the elevator. Don't worry about that. You don't have to worry about that part.
But the objective here was to design a building that was as of right so that it could be built in the time frame that it needs to be built.
I think people would like an elevator at the station, but
yeah,
that's just maybe I'm speaking for other people instead of myself, but.
Thank you, Adam. That was an excellent question and a good answer, Paul. So next we have Judy Schneider.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. It was appreciated and very well done. I know you said that you will have people out there for traffic when necessary, but that's not the same as hiring a separate pedestrian manager that would be out there all the time. I suggest that you consider putting that on your plate. I know somebody like Sam Schwartz's company does an excellent job at these kinds of sites, and having someone there full-time, I think would ease the community's feeling about the traffic and the pedestrians and everything during this construction period. And then also, Anthony, I know you had an item on the agenda which was taken off about the garages and the 20%, the zoning. Is that something we will go back to your next zoning meeting?
Yes,
Really, this whole thing is just another example besides the congestion pricing, and not only all the garages that were mentioned uptown that are closing, but all the garages in the 60s that are closing. We really, like we did R8B for Community Board 8, we need to get the city to change that 20% in the zoning for new buildings without going through ULURP for our community district.
I can't agree more that we need new parking, but it will be a topic for another meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you,
Judy.
And thank you all for your presentation.
Okay, Craig, we don't have to talk about parking. Craig later.
Hi, everyone. And yes, Anthony, I do have to talk about parking. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I also just want to thank everyone for all the time and effort you've put into this presentation and working with the community on all these issues. So the reason I want to talk about parking is because I am the co-chair of the Community Board 8 Transportation Committee. So obviously all these issues are particularly particular interest to me. So I guess my first question is, how have you, and how, if so, how recently have you engaged with New York City Department of Transportation regarding issues that you're going to be dealing with regarding parking and loading and unloading and others?
We've had one cursory meeting with the Department of Transportation at this point, where we've shown them the baseline plans, and we're working now to set up our next round of more detailed meetings with the DOT, hopefully within the next couple of months.
Okay, so as Michelle mentioned, because I was obviously going to bring this up, at our meeting, our Transportation Committee meeting coming up on October 12th, New York City DOT will be presenting plans for street improvements that would incorporate a complete street design, meaning that it would have bike, bus, and pedestrian improvements as part of it. So that, of course, may result in a significant change in not only usage, but the parking regulations that may result afterwards. I haven't seen the plans yet, so I don't know what they're thinking in terms of a bus lane and whether it be in the parking lane or whether it be an offset bus lane to preserve parking. But I would suggest that you reach out to DOT and make sure that you know what they're thinking and that they know what you're looking at, so you're synced up as best as possible to most effectively handle the future condition and especially passenger drop-off activity that will never inevitably be taking place on Third Avenue. So, and I welcome you to watch our meeting in a few weeks so you can see their presentation.
That's great. Thank you very much, Greg.
Oh, you're very welcome. All right, so now regarding some more parking questions, and I just need to say, just for the record, that you've heard a lot about parking and concerns about parking and parking requirements and such, but I just want to make clear that not everyone in the community shares those opinions, and especially with congestion pricing, there is no evidence that there will actually be an increased demand in parking in the area of the project if and when congestion pricing gets implemented. This is highlighted by the environmental assessment, which doesn't project any increases in parking and reductions in congestion for the community in, at large, especially north of the transition zone, near the boundary zone. So in the 70s, the environmental assessment really spoke to the fact that there isn't expected to be much in the way of people coming in and parking up here and taking the subway down there. They point to what's called as rational choice method as the way people behave and why they wouldn't actually do that, because it would cost them more time and effort than it would be worth. But and I also think that the impact of the loss of a few spaces on the street would really be de minimis when looking at the broader picture. And I just want to speak for those who may believe that we should be discouraging driving and ideally not being quick to just seek out new additional parking. But I also think it is a reasonable concern that there may not be enough parking to accommodate the demand from this project that's going to result from activity of both patients and the staff. So I just wanted to better understand the parking situation, both currently and in the future conditions. So I guess my first question is, was there a traffic study or parking study that was performed that you had engaged in as part of this project so far?
Yeah, there was not a traffic study done as part of this project. No.
Okay, so is there a plan to conduct a traffic study to be able to look at projected future conditions, how many vehicles may be expected, what the modal split may be for the incoming staff and visitors to the facility, and what the parking inventory is in the immediate vicinity of the area?
I think it's something we can certainly look into, Craig, as to whether or not it's something we can move forward with on this project. We can certainly take a look at it.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you do that. And I know that the project, the Excel project, the 79th and First was referenced, and that's an example of a similar situation. Then after they presented to us, they did conduct a traffic study, and it was very helpful for us to understand and be able to substantiate the claims that there really wasn't going to be much of an impact with no parking being included in their project. And I think we would need to do the same here. So I strongly urge you to please do that. Now, at the same time, do you have a sense of how many individuals will be inhabiting the building at its busiest time during any given day? And that includes both people working and visiting?
Yeah, Yeah, I believe that was something that was brought up a few moments ago, and we're gonna try to pull that data together and get back to you on that.
Okay, I didn't, I thought that was a question about number of patients as opposed to patients plus staff. So,
We'll make sure to encompass all of that data.
yeah, I'm a bit surprised you don't know that. I would think that you would have a sense of.
I'm sure it's something we're going to be able to pull together very quickly. I think we have it in parsed formats. It just needs to be pulled together into a single answer.
Okay, and then, and I don't know if you know this, I know you alluded to this also a few moments ago, but do you have a sense of what percentage of the activity that's going to be taking place in your facility is currently taking place within the general vicinity of this project, meaning at Lenox Hill or in other community facilities where people may already be coming in using existing transit and those who are driving using existing garages and existing spaces? Because I guess it's important to understand, are we talking about an entirely new population of users, or are some of them already embedded within the neighborhood in terms of the various purposes that they would be using this building for within Northwell?
Another great question, Craig, and I think that we can get a more finite response to that. It is certainly not an entirely net new group of individuals. We were thinking that it's probably somewhere around 70-75% that would be having already had a pattern of use in this area already. With this idea that there will likely be some growth, as there is with any new facility that is put together. So that's just a ballpark off the top of what we know, but we can equally look to get you some more firm numbers.
So 75% ballpark for what's already taking place, meaning that it would only be about a 25% increase. And mostly people shifting from one location to another.
Correct.
Okay, that's very good to know. And again, if you're able to project that out, I think that will help assuage some of the concerns that we've heard regarding parking, given that this may not be producing as much new demand as I think some people may be fearing.
Agreed.
In terms of parking placards, as I'm sure you know, many placards that exist are illegal or illegitimate, and I'm very, very glad to hear that Northwell is no longer supporting placards and discouraging the use of placards. So kudos to that. In regards to the receiving area, have you looked into the possibility of trucks being able to pull in rather than having to back out and make their three-way turns within internally?
We didn't look at it here. I honestly, looking at the dimension of the site, don't believe we would have enough footage to be able to make that turn within the building.
What are the dimensions again? What is the?
Is it at that part of the building? What is our building depth? 75 feet in depth.
Yeah. That would seem to be.
I don't think we would have the dimension, but that being said, our goal is to set this in a way that it's not, a 5 or 6 point turn for the truck outside. We want them down in the dock, close the door, and make them disappear. Which is why we've designed this receiving area in a way that the trucks come fully in the building and the door can immediately close to make them disappear. And again, with working with our IDC, reduce the number of trucks coming to the building.
Yeah. Okay. And again, I think there is an opportunity if you're able to truly coordinate your activity and manage the types of vehicles that are being used to allow for smaller vehicles and ideally no queuing on the street and spacing it out. I think that would all contribute to a community benefit.
That is 100% our goal.
Okay, great. One non-transportation question, then one last transportation related question. And maybe I missed this and I apologize. Did you mention anything, or are you looking at trying to put in any type of green roof or something to reduce the impact of the urban heat island and or plantings on the sidewalk for trees to be able to grow?
Yes.
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
Marissa, do you want to touch a little bit about what our plans are or thoughts at this point?
I mean, the plan is any area available essentially to put green roof, we would accommodate that. For exactly the reasons you're saying.
Hmm.
It will be
Solar panels or no? Or you can't do both?
We don't have solar panels on the roof, no.
All right, worth a shot.
I don't think you could do both.
Yeah, I didn't know that you could either.
You
All
have
right. And then finally, one last note, and I want to thank Adam for bringing up the transit bonus question, and I agree entirely with him. And although I understand, I am a bit disappointed, given your emphasis on being a community facility, that you didn't fully consider the spectrum of options that you could have been able to use to be able to think through this project in a way that would provide for the critically needed elevator and accessibility improvements at the 77th Street station, alongside with the community request to have ground floor retail in your facility. So I'm guessing it's full steam ahead. You've come this far, but I just want to state that I think beyond just your project, but I think as a city and as a community for future projects, I would hope that developers and owners would think through this and really think about completing a community and providing all those critically needed elements to emerge in a way that we are better off, and everyone be better off, rather than thinking about only the programmatic needs and how to achieve that quickly. Because I understand your perspective, I understand the importance of it, but we're all going to have to coexist, and I think we would all benefit from the ground floor retail and better accessibility to the subway. So with that, I look forward to hearing back from you on all the questions regarding traffic and transportation, and I thank you again.
Craig, quick question for you. For the traffic study, do you know what the radius is in terms of how far out from the project site that the traffic study has to take into consideration?
I'm not sure that there is a requirement. I thought for the X Hill project that they basically looked out within a quarter mile radius of the facility.
Okay.
So, I mean, a quarter mile is generally what's considered walkable.
That's pretty good.
So that would be probably a good range.
Okay. Thanks, Craig.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Elizabeth Rose.
Thank you, everybody. I wanted to start by saying thank you for planning an as-of-right building. But I will jump on the Adam and Craig bandwagon a bit and say, Paul, this community supports things that are not as of right that genuinely benefit the community. And therein is the distinction, and that is what you, for the second time, seem to miss.
Can I just respond to that briefly? It is not, there are numbers of reasons why people don't prefer to build as of right when they can. And one of them is the uncertainty, which you've spoken to. But the other is that it takes 18 months, 2 years to get through the process. That's a long time.
My question is someone asked earlier this evening what the height of the building would be, and your response was 215 feet. I recall in your presentation, there was something that referred to 234 feet. Can you please explain what that is and why you didn't use that number, which is higher, in your response?
We, when the question was asked, we actually answered that the primary roof height of the building is 215 feet with a bulkhead that extends to 232 feet. Was our answer earlier. So the bulkhead of 232 is above the zoning requirement of 215, but an allowed protrusion for the elevator core of the building.
Okay, so thank you for that greater level of detail. You all have been generally very forthcoming. This was one example where, yes, the question might have been how tall is the building? The answer is, in the total, it's 234, including the bulkhead. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I just want to, just a couple of things, and since I get to be last, so I'll wrap this up. I will really appreciate it. You guys have been unbelievably patient, attentive. You came back after you had computer problems, and I really appreciate it. And a lot of people spoke to how specifically and how encouraging it was that you answered questions specifically. I'm going to take a slightly different tack and appreciate the lack of specificity, which means you're not done yet with the design and planning process, which means that the things that we've talked about tonight and pressed on you again and again and again might begin to find their way into your project. So I'm actually encouraged by the lack of finality in a lot of your statements. And I have a question that I don't think you can answer, but first I'll make a comment concerning how long it takes to get things approved through a ULURP process. One of my fellow committee members, Adam, of course, reminded me that you bought this property 4 years ago. It's been vacant for a long time. That 18 months to 2 years could have been 18 months to 2 years ago. That's a comment. It's not a question. But the question I have, which I don't know that you know the answer to, and doesn't bear on this project, but bears on lots of other things that are happening in Community District 8. How many housing units have been lost as a consequence of this potential development? And they're lost because the buildings are gone. Do you guys know? We can look it up. I was just curious.
I don't believe we have that information with us. Sorry about that.
That's okay. No, that's all right. I wouldn't really expect you to. But I think it's one of the things that as a committee, we have to start to track because in many of the residential developments that are being built in the eastern half of Community District 8, there is a net loss of housing units, let alone affordable housing units. And I think that it's something that we have to begin to track in order to make certain arguments for other projects and ideas. And I also just, in closing of my comments, I want to say that I really do appreciate that you're trying to keep this building to 210 feet of zoning height, which is obviously our goal for the whole eastern, this committee's goal for the whole eastern half of Community District 8. So with that, I'm turning this over to Elizabeth for all the new business. Thank you. And thanks again, guys.
I hope we will make this very quick. We'll take all the new business together to speed things up. And we have only one announcement, which is that Memorial Sloan Kettering, another healthcare group, is planning to demolish its residential building it has on York between 66 and 767 and build a larger clinical building. We will be hearing that in the future. If they're ready, we will hear
Hopefully
it
they'll come
next
to it,
month.
yeah.
And is there any old or new business? Okay, Craig?
Hi, so I just want to bring up, I'm sure others read about the proposed project on 94th Street, the mid-block project. And I just want to find out if we are going to get involved in this and if this was part of the conversation when back, I think it was in February or so, when Adam did his presentation proposing rezoning for some of the manufacturing or commercial districts that are still in place in the low 90s, and how we're going to be dealing with that, because between what's happening on 90th Street with the storage facility and this proposal, even if it never happens, I think we all see the threat to what can occur with inappropriate zoning that's in place that's outdated and antiquated and needs to be addressed. So we just want to figure out if we're going to be talking about that.
Well,
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
I think is the
probably
answer.
yes, we could consider it. And that building, and we have just bad news to wrap up. We have two buildings that are around 500 feet that are in the pipeline. And I hope we don't have to take them up. I hope they decide to do better. But anyway, okay, Elaine? Elaine Walsh?
There she
Right. I
is.
wanted to ask, what is the status with the special districts proposal? Where are we? When can we hear from Tuck? It's been a bit. I understand the contract ran out of money, but this is the new year. So any idea when we will hear something about the special districts so we can move forward? The community has been asking. I've had a lot of calls and contacts, and I just wanted to know from you all so I know what to say to them.
Well, Tuck just told me that he still has not heard back from city planning. The pre-application has been filed. He said that the staff sounded more positive than they have in the past, and I think that the thing that shook a great many of us up is this proposal. You know, the 535 foot building it is proposed for 2nd and 77th. So I hope we get this moved forward very quickly, and as soon as there's anything that we can do, we will move forward, and we badly need the financing to go ahead with this. But whatever comes down the pike proves that we're right in what we want. It's badly needed, and I hope that we have something to report by next month. But we're keeping our fingers crossed. Thank you, Adam. Adam Walt.
Yeah, yes, I was just gonna say that I had kind of put the rezoning research on hold, both because 421A expired and you can't build a mixed income rental building without 421A. It's just not possible. And second, because I was understanding that 210 was the priority, at least from this committee and our board. However, I I think that with what Friedland has done, they've kind of reignited what I think we need to do is continue to explore the M14 and the C84 rezonings before we have more 15-story self-storage buildings coming to the neighborhood. So I'll get back on task.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. Any more? I know there was a lady who wanted to bring something up, but I guess she started to starve to death or something and went home.
There's someone waving her arm. No, you're applauding. You're not raising your hand. You have to use
raise your hand the way you.
It says raise hand.
Sasha?
Oh, you got her? Okay, great. Sasha. Yeah.
All right, let me.
Thanks, Zachary.
Yeah, no problem. Now you can unmute Sasha.
Hi, sorry everyone. I don't know how to raise hand on Zoom. I know the other reactions, but for whatever reason, raise hand was not showing up for me. I actually wanted to speak about the East 94th Street rezoning. I'm not sure if this is a topic we want to broach right now, but I am calling in to speak as a longtime resident my entire life, directly adjacent to the proposed project site. My family has lived in this apartment since 1977, and I still live here. My mom, this was her view her entire life, and now it has been mine. And I was shocked to see that the developer Chapman Group has proposed and submitted their EAS to DCP for a 46-story tower. I understand that it's an M14 light industrial district. It's a vestige of Rupert Brewery and a testament to the history of the Yorkville area. But they're proposing a C46, which is a high density residential mixed use building, where they also want commercial space. And as many of us know, commercial space on the Upper East Side has suffered a lot, especially in this Yorkville area from 86 to 96. 3rd Avenue is ridden with empty storefronts. And conceptually, for the rest of mid-blocks throughout the whole Upper East Side, we see R8B zoning or R8, which I live in an R8 building, and this proposal would cause almost an island effect that my block of 95th Street would be island into R8, sandwiched between Normandy Court and this new development, as well as a small R8 lot directly behind the Carnegie Park development. And, Blood Center was a huge deal, and that was only 233 feet. And this proposed project is almost 500 feet. It's 480 feet roughly. And that's taller than Normandy Court. That's taller than the Easton, which is a through lot that goes north-south instead of east-west. So there's no concern about, sunlight in the same way, whereas this building blocks the sun on all the neighboring pops in the area, which we happen to have a lot of them right here, 2 at Normandy Court, 1 on 95th and 3rd. And I know their renderings that they have in the EAS take into account the moving of the Marx Brother playground to the middle of the block. But right now, as far as I know, that isn't happening anytime soon. And I find it a little disingenuous to use renderings of a 68-story tower to make your 46-story tower look smaller and less of an imposition to the area. And I think just because this area was Rupert Brewery and I'm part of an urban renewal project, that doesn't mean let's just build high-rise towers in mid-block. Mid-block is really for these smaller buildings, so light can still come through, that it has a community feel still. And when the Kent came, the Kent obliterated every sense I had of community on my singular block. I went to lower lab school, and there was such a beautiful synergy between Zesty's Pizza, the candy store, the nail salon, the dry cleaner, the barber shop, all of these small businesses that we had. And the Kent did bring a pre-K, but the only commercial space left on the block where the Kent is now being turned into a golf shop, which really doesn't benefit anyone here. And I play golf, and I don't consider it a benefit. And my concern with this building is that a developer will say, well, we're bringing you, MIH affordable housing, we're bringing you your 25%, but that doesn't really account for the 400 or so new luxury apartments that are coming, that right now, I think roughly 16,000 square feet of community facility space isn't an asset to the area, and that's what they've proposed. I don't think retail mid-block on what is relatively a non-retail kind of block, and where retail is suffering, I don't think that's an asset. And I think it's, seeing how Blood Center went, I am concerned that the city will definitely push this as highest and best use for any lot. And I understand it's industrial, and those are things to be reconsidered, as there really aren't that many light industrial zoning lots left in the area. And I just happen to live behind one. That's not something I knew until very recently. I just knew it as the 2 garages and the tenement that had Con Ed signs up, but apparently it's been sold, and that's why nothing was ever going on with the Con Ed problems with that building. And my tenement took a beating from the 2nd Avenue subway construction. It's taken a beating from the Kent and all other construction that's gone up in recent years in this area. But I just wanted to bring that to light because it was something that took me by surprise.
Yeah, well, I think it took everybody by surprise, but they do have to be rezoned to build it. So it isn't something that's going to go up. And it's certainly something that as it moves forward, we will be taking up. And I don't think that people think it smells all that wonderful. So
good to know.
Anyway, we will certainly watch that. Okay, and thank you for bringing it forward. And it joins the other 500-foot building that we're not thrilled with. Anything else under old or new business? Oh, Lois Cohen.
Okay, I don't know how to turn my audio. Start video.
You're on.
Okay, I don't know if this is the appropriate venue in which to raise this, but I'm on 3rd and 75th, and I keep watching them demolish the buildings that, starting with the Manhattan Shade Company and going all the way down to Listake. Are there plans that the board is aware of for what's going to be happening in that location? I see they're continuing now to move down 75th Street towards 2nd Avenue.
Yes, the short answer is yes. And actually, we were going to talk about it briefly tonight as part of the little, after you see this, you'll be able to look it up yourself, presentation I was going to give. But in short, it's a new building that is going to be about 200 feet high, 215, 220 in there somewhere. It will occupy the entire corner, and it will have, let's see, I'm trying to remember. I think there are 38 apartments in this building, which is many fewer than the number of apartments that have been demolished in order to make way for it. Right. It's a condominium building. I think Naftali is the developer, but I'm not sure. Yeah, Adam is nodding. It's Naftali. So that's what we know. And I promise next month I'll start, unless of course MSK wants to come and see us, by showing everybody how you can do this yourself, how you can look this stuff up yourself, which is just going to be helpful.
And that's
going
going to go
forward.
down 75th Street as well?
It
or
doesn't
just-
go that far down 75th Street. It really only, it stays within about 100 feet of the avenue, I think.
And is it your understanding it will go from 75th all the way over to what is it, Met Salona?
Yeah, it's about half